Hello and welcome to today's lecture. So, before I start with today's material, let us review what all we have done so far in our course. First thing that we did elementary programming. What is elementary programming? Whatever formula you have, you want to calculate them using the computer. So, for that you need a language which converts all your mathematical language into a programming language. For example, e to the x. In normal writing we write e raised to power x. In a programming line there is nothing like raising something to the power. So, we write it in the program as x into bracket x bracket complete. So, these are simple translations of formulae into a programming language. So, we have been using Fortran as a programming language. So, in addition to this simple formula translation, what we need is the special techniques that are relevant to the programming language. One of them was this do loops. So, what do the do loops do? Do loops allow you to do an operation any number of times as you want. So, the statement was do 10 I going from 1 to n. So, that means all the statements up to a statement defined by line 10 will be executed n number of times. Those were the do loops. Then we had if statements. What do the if statements do for you? It is a condition. If A is greater than B, you do something. If A is less than B, you do something else. If A is equal to B, you do something else. So, this is basically branching. Your program is going from top to bottom, and at some stage if you want to branch, you will use an if statement. So, then the crucial thing was input and output. What are these inputs and outputs? Suppose you want to read a lot of data into your program, you can always read it from the screen, but reading from the screen can be very tedious, because suppose you have 100 numbers to read and you make a mistake in the 94th number, you will have to type all the things again. So, instead of reading and writing from the screen, it is better to read and write from files. So, we also discussed how to open a file from a program using an open statement, open and unit numbers. We have done that also, reading and writing from files. Then most of our operations are in a Linux operating systems, okay, like when you compile a program with G-Fortran. So, this is a compiler in a Linux operating system. So, you use Linux operating system to compile and execute your programs. Then since we are using Fortran as a language, there are several rules for writing Fortran statements. One of the first rules is that all the characters in the line begin from the 7th column. Okay. The first 6 columns have to be left blank, and if one line continues into the other line, you put a in the 6th column you write 1, 2, 3 or some character, so that it continues to the second line. Then line numbers were written in the first 5 columns. Remember, all line numbers are in the first 5 columns, and one of the other rules was that all variables in the program which start with I, j, k, l, m, n, these are all integers, and all the variables that begin with a, b, c, d, e, f, g or x, y, z, they are all real numbers. So, the programming language gives you this facility to make some numbers integers, make some other numbers real, so that you do not have to declare all these statements. In other programming language, before you start writing the program, you have to declare everything. So, Fortran enables you to have this default declaration statements. Then finally, we had one practical session. What we did in the practical session was we executed a simple program, then we learnt about compilation, we learnt about execution. There were some errors also in the program. We will correct that error when we take up the next practical session. So, what we will do today, that is outlined in my next slide. So, what we will do today, we will discuss a little bit about format statements. Then we will consider a program to arrange numbers in an ascending order. So, this is one of the uses of programming. You can arrange things the way you want. Then we will discuss the important concepts of functions and subroutines. Functions and subroutines are subprograms which makes your program stronger by compartmentalizing all your tasks into different units. Just like an institution works with several departments, your different programs are like different departments. Each one will do its own function and return it to your main coordinating program. Then there is also a common statement, we will illustrate that. It is very much of use when you do subroutines and functions. Mainly it is used for subroutines. Then we will discuss differences between functions and subroutines. So, let us now begin with a format statement. So, you remember that when we wrote something or read something from the screen, we said write star comma star x1, x2, x3, x4. So, what was the meaning of star comma star? Star comma star means the whole thing was written on the screen or the whole thing was read from the screen. Now, in this statement what I have is write 12 comma star x1, x2, x3, x4. So, what this does, this file, this 32, this is a number, this is connecting with some file number. So, remember open unit equal to 32, file equal to output dot dat, or open unit equal to 31, file equal to input dot dat. We have seen those open statements which connect a number to a file name in your directory. So, this way all the output as well as input can be written in a file, so that your whole screen remains uncluttered, because if you write 1000 lines on a screen, your screen can only see some 20 or 30 lines and you will miss all the earlier data. So, reading and writing from files also we have studied, but now we want to study what is a format, because the second star here, the second star will refer to a line number. Now, look at this line. What this line says is read 31 comma 22 I1, I2, I3, I4. So, this is my read statement. So, this is going to read information from file which is connected with this number 31. That is the file with which I am connecting. 31 is a file. You have opened some unit with some file name which is connected with 31. 22 is a line number. Look at this. I have 22 as a line number. That 22 gives you the format in which the data is written. So, in this case my data is I1, I2, I3, I4. It is going to read these 4 numbers. These 4 numbers are integers because I begin with I. Each variable begins with I here, I1, I2, I3, I4. So, since there are 4 numbers, so I am giving this format 4I4. What this 4I4 means? I4 means each integer has 4 spaces to write the number. This 4 means there are 4 integers like that. So, 4I4 would mean I can write 4 numbers in that line and each number will have 4 spaces. Okay. So, that is what I have written here. I4 means there are 4 spaces for the integer, and since there are 4 integers, I will give 4I4 as my format. Format really is the structure in which you want the input to be read or the output to be written. So, it gives you a better control over your entire line space in your input or output. Otherwise, if you instead of 31 comma 22, suppose I had said 31 comma star, that means I can give those 4 integers in 4 different lines. I may be able to separate them by commas. So, when I give a star here, I am reading from the screen and the total format is arbitrary. Whereas, if I give a format here, then I cannot write arbitrarily, I should give exactly in the format given. It is like in a classroom you have 10 chairs in a row. That means, these only 10 people can sit in this row, not the 11th person. So, like that format gives you an arrangement of your line into which you can write the information or from which you can read the information. So, this particular statement I considered, it was for integers. Now, suppose I have real numbers. How will I read real numbers or write real numbers? That is given in the next line. Now, look at this. This particular statement, I say write 32 comma 24 x1, x2, x3, x4, x5. So, these x1, x2, x3, x4, x5 are all real variables. So, real variables means what? Everything will have a decimal point. This we call as a real number. An integer has no fraction. So, it is only a full number. So, whereas a real number has a fraction. So, that fraction I can write in many ways. I can write it as 1.23, or I can also write in an exponential format. That exponential format is useful because suppose I have a number which is 0.0000 with 22 zeros, then followed by some numbers. Then it is not possible for me to write so many zeros in my output. So, it is best to write it in the exponent format. So, that is what we are going to do. So, these are written. So, since these are 5 numbers, my format is given in line number 24. So, I say write 32 comma 24 and 24 is the format statement, 24 format 5 12.4. So, what is the meaning of this 5? This 5 means there are 5 numbers which are going to be written, and E 12.4, it means that it is an E format. E format is an exponential format. 12.4, now we need to understand what is this 12.4. 12 means total 12 spaces are allotted to that number, and 0.4, that means there are 4 numbers after the decimal point. Look at this last line. This last line says minus 20.4433 into E minus 05. So, these are the 12 spaces. Since I have 5 numbers, I have given 5 times 12. So, each number takes 12 places. Now, let us see how the 12 places have been taken. Minus is one place, 2 is one place, 0 is third place, point. After the decimal points, you have 4433. So, 4 after the decimal point, 1 space for the decimal point, 0 and 2, these take up 2 more, then this minus sign. So, minus 20 point, these take up 4 values, 4433 takes 4 values, then E minus 05, these take up 4 spaces. This tells me that this number is minus 20.4433 into 10 to the power of minus 5. This E really means 10 to the power. So, 10 raised to minus 5. So, my first number is minus 20.4433 E minus 05. My second number is 233.7455 E to the plus 04. So, what is the meaning? The second number is 233 point, that means there are 233.7435 multiplied by 10 to the plus 4. So, which means what this format allows you to do, it allows you to keep only 4 numbers after the decimal point, 4 numbers after the decimal point, and since there are 5 numbers like that, first takes up 12 spaces, second will take up 12 spaces and so on. So, there will be total 5 numbers. So, the whole thing will take up 12 into 5, 5 into 12, that is 60 spaces. So, this is how it will write. If you had instead written write 32 comma star x1, x2, x3, x4, f5, it would have written first number and given some arbitrary spaces after the first number, then the second number, then the third number. The computer will give its own format, whereas here you have arranged them in your own format. So, while this is good, there is one problem. One problem is that between the first number and the second number, there is no space to make a distinction between 2 numbers. Ideally, we would have liked minus 20.4433 E minus 05. Then suppose I had 1 or 2 spaces here, then I could write the second number, then again some spaces, some more numbers. So, it would be a better arrangement, like when you arrange several chairs in a row, you keep some space between the chairs. So, how do I do that? That is indicated in the next slide. So, look at this now. I have illustrated many things in this slide. Okay. Now, let us, before I discuss this slide, let us see what are the advantages and disadvantages. Advantages is that you can write it in a very nicely ordered format, just as you arrange your room very nicely, you can arrange. The disadvantage is that when you input the data, you should know what the format is, because if you do not know the format and write in different ways, it will take some arbitrary values. So, the way you give input, you should give exactly the way the format is written. So, the only disadvantage is you should remember exactly what the format was, but with practice it is not a major issue, because you will have each one will have his own standard formats. You can read your data in that format, you can write in that format. So, you will get used to it. So, only disadvantages you have to remember, advantages is a nice arrangement. Now, let us take this particular next example. The next example says write star comma 33 number. Now, what is the meaning of the first star? First star says that you will be writing it now on the screen and not to a file. So, write and what is the format for that number? Format I3. So, the meaning of I3 is there are only 3 spaces given to that particular number. So, you will write that number in that format in 3 spaces. Now, let us take this example. Suppose what is the 33 is the line number and format I3 is the format into which you want to write the number. Now, look at this next one. C means a comment card. We all know that in any Fortran program you begin everything from the 7th column. In case there is a character C in the first column, it is a comment. Now, what is the meaning of this comment? Suppose the number I want to write has the size of 98477. So, I want to write it in I3 format. There will be a total confusion because you have said that the format can have only 3 characters, 3 spaces, but the number is very large. So, computer will be in deep trouble. Which number should it write? Should it write 44477 or should it write 984? Both would be wrong. So, therefore, the format should be such that it accommodates all possible numbers that your output can be. If the output has very large numbers, so then you should give a format which will have so many spaces as many are needed by the number. Okay. So, this is one point. So, one of the disadvantage of a format statement like I3 is that if the number is more than 3 digits, you cannot use this format. So, all this you have to keep track when you give your format. Now, we will come back to my earlier thing. Now, suppose I want spaces between numbers for clarity. Remember, we wrote 5 numbers earlier. Now, let us also write 5 integers this time. Let my 5 integers be n1, n2, n3, n4 and n5. These are my 5 integers. I want to write them on the screen and I want to write them in a format such that between every 2 numbers there is 2 spaces. So, now I have given this format statement. As I mentioned before, the format statement always begins with a line number and this line number should be in the first 5 columns. So, I have given 39 in the first 5 columns. Then the format into bracket 5 into bracket I5 comma 2x bracket complete bracket complete. So, one formula you should remember or one thing you should know, as many right brackets are there, you need so many left brackets. So, what I have done, since there are 5 numbers, I have given this outer 5, then into bracket that is I5 comma 2x. What is the meaning of I5 comma 2x? That means I5 is the space required for the integer, comma 2x. 2x means 2 blank spaces. So, and bracket complete. So, what is in the inner bracket? I5 comma 2x, that means 5 spaces for the integer and 2 blank spaces, bracket complete, and 5 times the whole thing. So, that means you will have 5 numbers, each number will have 5 spaces and 2 blank spaces after the number. So, all this is enclosed in the outer bracket. So, the format is there are 5 numbers to be written and how do you write each number? First 5 digits are your numbers and the next 2 are the blank spaces. So, that is my format statement and the next line is write star comma 39. So, this 39 is a line number. The format statement number can either come before this write statement or after the write statement. There is no rule that the line number should be after the write or before the write. You can write the format statement wherever you want. A good strategy would be to write all the format statement at the end of the program, so that it does not clutter your program significantly. So, now let us see how it will write these 5 numbers. The way it would write these 5 numbers are, I have just since it is a program, I have given a comment. The way it would write the first 5 numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 2 blank spaces, then the next 5 numbers 2 blank spaces, the next number written in 5 spaces, 2 blank spaces, next number 2 blank spaces, next number and 2 blank spaces. In this case, all the 5 numbers were 5 digit numbers. Suppose some number is a 2 digit number, then it would use, suppose instead of 77777, I had only 77. The way the program should write, it will not write anything in the first 3 and it will write 77 in the last 2 columns. So, you do experiment with this. What I recommend to you, you write a program, use different formats. So, we have discussed only 2 formats, the E format for real numbers and the integer format. There are other formats as well, but we need not worry too much, because if you know one format to write real numbers and another format to write integers, that will be sufficient for most of our work, but sometimes you may want to write characters into the output. Then what you have is called a character format. So, as and when we need it, we will use that character format in reading as well as sometimes you may want to read a name of a person into your program. You may want to write name as an output. So, there are other formats, we will use it as and when we need it, or you can just look through how to write characters in Fortran. Now, to summarize again what we did, 2x refers to the 2 spaces after the number, and instead of 2 spaces, suppose I wanted 5 spaces between numbers, I will give it 5x. Okay. So, this is what is the summary of the format statement. So, from now on what we will do, we will not put too much effort into format or types of format. Our main purpose is the logic in the programming. So, we will concentrate not too much on formats, but go through the logic of programming. So, the next thing I want to do, I want to discuss a program. It is a very simple program, but there is a main idea in this program. We want to arrange numbers in an ascending order, some order, it could be ascending order, it could be descending order. Okay. So, now before we go into this, let us see what is the logic when you exchange 2 variables. Suppose I have a number a and b, there could be some values for a and b. I want to exchange the values of a and b. Suppose a is 4 and b is 3. I want a situation where a becomes 3 and b becomes 4. So, how do I do it in a program? So, what is the first thing you may want to do? Suppose I want to exchange a and b. The simple idea would be a equal to b and b equal to a. This is how a normal person will do, but there is a major problem with this. Let us understand what is the problem. So, let us say a is equal to 3 and b is equal to 4. Then my first thing would be a equal to b. So, what it has done, a was already 3, but when I say a is equal to b, b was 4. So, it makes a equal to 4. Okay. So, the next line says b equal to a. Now, b equal to a, but a is already become 4. So, what this will do, it will make both a and b equal to 4. So, the whole idea that you wanted to exchange a and b is lost, because whenever you write a statement a equal to b, what it does is it replaces whatever original value of a by the value of b. So, since b was 4, a has become 4. Now, next line makes b also equal to 4. So, rather than exchanging anything, all you would have done, you have made it both a and b as 4. So, this is not the correct way to do it. So, the correct way to do it is to use a temporary variable. So, let us say a was 3 and b was 4. Now, I said temp equal to a. So, that means this temp has the original value of a into that variable. So, temp is 3. Now, next line is a equal to b. So, b was 4, now a becomes 4. Now, the next line is b is equal to temp. Now, b becomes 3 because temp was already storing the original value of a. So, what does this illustrate? Whenever you want to exchange 2 objects in a program, whatever you want to exchange, one of them you save in a temporary location or a temporary variable, then you exchange them, so that the final result, now a and b would have a different order than the original. So, remember, whenever you want to exchange the first variable, you have to save it in some temporary location or as a temporary variable. Okay. So, now this idea is very crucial. I shall use this idea to arrange numbers in an ascending order. Now, that is my next program. So, let us start arranging numbers in an ascending order. So, what is the strategy before you actually arrange? Let us see what is the strategy. What I will do, strategy would be, first you have to read all the numbers, because you want to arrange them in some order. So, you have to read them in all the numbers. So, how will you read so many numbers? You read them in an array. Remember, we have already discussed arrays, array variables. You will read all of them in an array, because in an array each number will be assigned with one of the array variables. Suppose there are 10 variables in an array, a1, a2, a3 up to a10, then these 10 are the variables. Then I can arrange a1 in place of a2 or a10 in place of a3. I can arrange easily in a do loop. So, I need to use a dimension variable to read all the numbers. Then to arrange them in an ascending order, I shall use them, select them pairwise, because at the same time I cannot select all the numbers. So, I will take 2 at a time, and if I want in an ascending order, I will start keeping the lower numbers in the lower values of the array and higher numbers in the higher values of the array. So, I will keep on pairwise I will compare, exchange them, so that the final thing would be the entire sequence arranged in an ascending order. So, let me now start the program. So, this is my program to arrange numbers in an ascending order. So, what I will do here, first line would be I need to declare a dimension. So, dimension A 500, result 500. I just have what I have done, I have given an extra result as a variable, so that I want to keep the original array as it is, and in the result I want to rearrange numbers. Okay. So, since I want to read several numbers and I want to read it from a file, I do not want to read from the screen, because as we already saw that if there are hundreds of numbers there could be mistake in typing. So, I will open a unit, I will call it 15, file is equal to input, then I will open another file, I called unit equal to 16, file is equal to output. So, now I have an input file, I have an output file, now I want to read all these numbers. So, once the program executes, it will write on the screen input n, the number of points, the number of numbers on the screen. So, first thing the program, once you this line, on the line you will see input n, the number of points on the screen. So, then the program will wait for your input. So, you input say n, say let us say n is equal to 10, you want to arrange these numbers in an ascending order. So, 10 numbers you want to read from, this 10 is read from the screen. Now, you will read all these numbers from that file equal to 15. Okay. So, this is just the part for reading the numbers from that file. So, in the next class I will execute the logic for arranging the numbers in an ascending order. We will conclude this session now, and in the next session I will begin with this particular slide and we will review what we have done, and we will start again with the session of arranging numbers in an ascending order.